How you doing, Richard?
Pretty good.
I'm excited to have you on the show because every time we talk about the most controversial and divisive subjects in the vegan animal rights movement, and we're going to do this again. Partly because you're one of the few people who's actually willing to talk about these things. And I actually think it's incredibly important to talk about hard subjects for movements or civilizations to make any progress.
I think especially this one.
Yeah. So, and we're going to talk about sex.
Yeah.
I guess not specifically sex. And I shouldn't laugh too much because it is a serious subject because sexual abuse, sexual harassment, sexual misconduct is a really serious issue. And I guess the reason I invited you though is because I'm here to call you out again, Richard.
Sure.
And I'm going to call you out about calling other people out about calling people out. So 3 levels of call out. No, I'm actually not going to call you out. I'm going to try and call you in. And the reason I thought I wanted to have you on is because I think you have some very legitimate critiques of the way the vegan animal rights have been, and really the way human society has handled MeToo and these sexual harassment allegations. I also think the tone with which you've approached these issues is just so hostile, it's actually contributed to the problem. And I'll explain why in a bit. But let me just start by asking you, because I think people will probably be surprised by this answer. Do you think sexual harassment and misconduct are a problem in the vegan movement and more broadly in human society?
I know that they are a problem. It is a problem that exists in the vegan movement. I know there have been some influencers that I can't stand who are still on the platform, who I know with 100% certainty, I'd bet my life on, have committed rape and sexual assault.
Wow.
Namely the jackass Durand writer. He absolutely raped Hannah Chloe. He was also being sexually predatory towards a lot of young girls. So girls who were around the age of 18 at the time, pretty young. He's a guy who I think is in his 40s at least now. And he was taking advantage of young women in his movement who looked up to him. He certainly raped Hannah Chloe. So I know that these problems do exist. I don't know to what extent exactly, because I haven't seen too many, definite confirmed instances of vegan influencers at meetups or, DXC or CowSave. I haven't seen any absolute confirmed instances of rape or sexual assault at events like this, but I know it has at least happened in the past with influencers.
Yep.
As far as broader society, absolutely. Rape and sexual assault definitely happens a lot.
Yeah. So this is one of the reasons I thought it would be a fascinating conversation, because I was under the, I think, incorrect impression that you just didn't think there was any issue at all in regard to Me Too. And then we had a number of conversations that didn't actually have to do with Me Too. I think one involving politics, where you made some comments about Trump and the people around him that I thought were pretty surprising. Basically saying, yeah, these basically are a bunch of predators, that sort of thing. I think you said something along those lines. And I was a little surprised because I would have thought you'd be the person to write that sort of thing off based on just your reputation and things I'd heard about you. And frankly, even some of the videos I'd seen. Granted, maybe not watched as carefully as I should have, especially in light of what you just said now. And then I think you had previously said these things about vegan influencers who you thought had kind of probably committed some sort of sexual misconduct and it was unaddressed. And that made me think, I need to understand this a little more. And we've had some other conversations since then. And I think one of the things that I think would help the vegan movement come together is just realizing we actually all have some pretty common values, even the people disagreeing in some specific factual scenario or in some specific case. And obviously there are a couple of cases where I think in one case you're upset with the folks on my team, Direct Action Everywhere, in regard to a case involving an activist in France. But fundamentally, I think we agree that sexual assault and misconduct is a problem. And when it happens, it should be confronted and it should be addressed in some way. Is that a fair characterization to describe kind of our positions as far as you know them?
Well, yeah, when it comes to common values, I think we do, I'm not sure, I don't know your position on this yet, but the disagreement that I have with all of these Me Too people is that we do fundamentally disagree on values. We don't fundamentally disagree on the issue of, sexual violence being wrong, and we have to do something about it. The big disagreement here is this idea that we have to believe all victims, all women, under any circumstances. How do we deal both socially and criminally with these sorts of accusations or crime? That's where the disagreement, I don't know, it's kind of strange to say, well, we have common ground here. We both think rape is bad. What do you expect? Right?
Yeah, sorry, I shouldn't laugh about that, but yeah. But it's kind of funny that we even have to ask these questions and have these conversations, because I think the reason I'm laughing is because I think the way a lot of people would probably characterize your position is you just don't think rape is bad, which I don't think is correct. And I think it's good to flesh that out.
Yeah, that's outrageously stupid.
Yeah. So let's dive into this more. I mean, why you obviously have a real concern about at least Durand. And for the record, I don't know Durand. I've never talked to him. I know he's like a YouTube influencer. I think some of his content's quite good, but I have nothing to verify the specific kind of claim that you just made. But what's the difference between, for example, the situation with respect to Durand, where you've said quite confidently you have genuine concerns about this gentleman, and a situation like, for example, the activists in France? Why do you think one should be treated with so much severity, which, I think you maybe appropriately treated with quite a bit of severity, even in your introductory comments here, and the other, you should make a video basically, I think it's fair to say you're mocking the people raising the concerns.
Yeah, so the difference is evidence. So I know the type of person Durand is. There were many corroborators who could attest to Hannah Chloe's story. There were other women who came forward with similar stories of him being extremely sexually aggressive and inappropriate to young women, using psychological manipulation tactics to try to lure them into, an apartment where they're completely alone. They don't have access to anybody who could help them and get them out of that situation. And doing whatever he could, he would rely on, psychological manipulation, where he would never take no for an answer. He would shame them. He'd just keep going until he got a yes. And in the case of Hannah Chloe's situation, she kept saying no the entire time. And then when the no didn't work, he forced himself on her. Oh. There's also corroborating bits of evidence, too, where immediately the day after she, said this rape took place, he took the first plane flight back to Australia he could. And that was not a scheduled flight. So he was supposed to be in Thailand for a certain period of time. He ended up leaving far earlier than he was supposed to. And literally the morning after, the absolute first flight he could take, he flew back to Australia before he could potentially ever face any kind of criminal charges. Other parts of Hannah Chloe's story were completely corroborated by other witnesses. Durand tried to create a situation in which he could get Hannah Chloe alone, and he said he needed her help to work on an ebook. Other people were there for that conversation, and it completely corroborated that part of the story. And also Durand's behavior after the event, he said, I have evidence that it was consensual. There was audio recordings. He refused to show the audio recordings. He lied about every single aspect of what happened, but there's nothing to show Hannah Chloe lied about anything. And almost everything she talked about could be corroborated or had similarities to women who had similar experiences to him. When it comes to William Burkhart, nothing about the story made any sense whatsoever. This girl was staying in an apartment with William Burkhart, two other people who were close friends of hers. When these supposed rapes occurred, the two people were in the house at the same time. And according to her testimony, these were pretty violent, brutal rapes. She claimed she was anally raped when she had no experience with anal sex. And he literally forced himself on her when two of her friends were literally in the next room and apparently when this very violent rape occurred, didn't hear anything. They didn't say anything. They didn't get any whiff of something strange going on. There were also photos that William Burkhart took after, the alleged rape occurred, where they're both hanging out alone together, laughing, yucking it up, smiling. They were spending time alone together after this all happened. And she didn't even bother to say anything to her friends. Again, they were not able to corroborate her story. They stayed completely out of it. Everything just smelled like absolute BS. She never went to the police. This is just some, thing that she posted on social media 3 months after the fact. Who knows why? And I also know people who've associated with this girl before. Apparently, she's very promiscuous. She's done things at parties like
being promiscuous doesn't mean that you can't be raped, though.
I understand that.
Yeah,
I understand that. But this idea that she had absolutely no interest in this guy, like this narrative that she's trying to spin, and he was just being very pushy. Again, based on the evidence that I have on her past behavior, his testimony versus her testimony, his side of the story sounds to match up much better than her side of the story.
Yeah. So for two reasons, I personally don't think we should get too much into the specific details. Like, I'm interested in the meta level conversation. And the first reason is
details.
It's about the details, but it's also about, on a meta level, whether the details matter or what details matter, right?
Oh, they matter. That's why.
Let me just say two things.
Criminal trial, they look at the details and they show evidence. It's all about the details.
There are a lot of cases of abuse that are not actually criminal in nature, but they're still a form of abuse, and that justifies some degree of accountability. And just to be candid, people have accused me of things, and I think they've accused me of things that have helped me learn and become a better person. I don't think it necessarily means I should be canceled, but I think that it's a useful thing for us to have some conversations about this, even if it doesn't rise the level of sexual misconduct, much less criminal misconduct. That it's a valuable thing for us to have conversations about this. And I think one of the problems I see in the conversations about Me Too is a lot of times it's like ships passing in the night. You have someone make an allegation. Sometimes that is not a criminal allegation. Sometimes it's just kind of a social kind of faux pas that someone's committed. And whether because of miscommunication or because they are not getting the sort of response they want, it gets escalated either intentionally or inadvertently into something much bigger than that. And to me, when you look at kind of what happened with the DXE activists that was removed, and I'm pretty sure, do you remember if I was lead organizer at the time? I think I'd already stepped down by that point, because I don't remember being very involved in this.
I'm not entirely sure.
Okay.
You might have stepped down.
Yeah, I think I had stepped down at this point. I was pretty supportive of what the team did with this gentleman. And maybe I was wrong, and maybe I didn't dive that deep into it. But I think I didn't dive that deep into it partly because I wasn't the lead organizer. And I have to say, I think in retrospect, I think DXE did make a number of mistakes. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to come on to this show to talk to you about this, because to a certain extent, I want to offer mea culpa and say, like, you had some legitimate points. I think there was a subsequent instance. And again, one of the reasons I don't want to get into the details is I want this video to stay up and not to get taken down. And I think if we jump into too many of the details, I think it'll likely get taken down. And I think these conversations are important to have on the meta level, at least. But the second reason is I just think while all these conversations we're having about details are public, the only reason you know about these details is because people have been posting publicly, their YouTube shows, Instagram posts, all sorts of Facebook posts about these things. And so, both the victims and the perpetrators have been in these disputes. Well, by the way,
publicly. In every instance, I tried to reach out to the accuser and the accused. William Burkhart was willing to talk to me. He shared everything. I also talked with his girlfriend. Yeah. She was never willing to talk to me about absolutely anything.
Yeah. To be fair, though, you're kind of a scary dude, and you've been known for being not a big supporter of Me Too. So I can understand why someone would not want to talk to you.
I can understand why some people don't like me and don't want to talk to me. But
I love talking to you.
But look,
I can understand why other people don't, though.
But yeah, there's two issues. One, I don't want it to be characterized like, oh, I'm just going off of social media posts. I wasn't. Sure. I actually tried to reach out and talk to both the accuser and the accused and get as much information as I could. And Two, again, this guy, he didn't seem to have anything to hide. He was willing to talk to me. And he shared everything, every detail that I asked. He shared everything, including his girlfriend, about their relationship. And he has a lot of positive relationships with women. He does post sexual content online. I don't know if he has an OnlyFans. But again, he has these sorts of open relationships, dates a lot of girls. I haven't heard anything from other women saying they've had negative experiences.
Yeah.
And in fact, he's a jiu-jitsu black belt. He actually taught his girlfriend how to do jiu-jitsu, and she was actually able to stop a rapist. Someone tried to rape her, and because he taught her jiu-jitsu, she was able to get him in, I think, an arm bar or something, get free, call the police, and the guy is arrested. So, again, it just doesn't fit the profile of somebody who seems like a sexual abuser when he has all these positive, relationships with women. But this girl who decided to just one day accuse him on Facebook with a story that just doesn't really make any sense and doesn't match up with any facts that we know of, she refused to talk about this at all, and her friends also refused to talk about this at all and corroborate any of her story.
Yeah. I suspect that's partly because, I mean, it's for the same reason everyone tells me not to talk to you about really anything. Not everyone. A lot of my friends say, like, I can't believe you're going to have vegan gains on the show, or why are you talking about Gaza vegan gains or racism or whatever the subject is, because your reputation precedes you as a pretty vicious debater. I think you're an effective debater. And I actually think my experience with you has always been the main thing that distinguishes you from other people isn't necessarily even kind of the viciousness of your positions, but your willingness to say what you actually think. I think other people say similar things to what you say. They just don't say them publicly. And I am a great believer in radical candor and trying to bring out all these private conversations and having them public. And you do that. And I've told you before, and I'll say this again, even when I disagree with you, and maybe especially when I disagree with you, I'm grateful to you for that. Having said that, a lot of other people don't take that position, because these are scary conversations. It's scary to be accused of sexual harassment. It's also scary to be accused of fabricating sexual harassment. You don't want to be like an Amber Heard character. You look at what happened to Amber Heard, and no one wants to be in that situation. So I think that explains partly why people would not want to talk to you specifically. They may be willing to talk to someone else who's willing to interrogate the evidence more carefully. But I will say, here's one thing I would also suspect we agree on, which is that absolutely we should believe women and believe anyone, in the sense that when someone makes an allegation, it should be taken seriously. And, I think the percentage of fabricated allegations, whether you think it's 1%, 5%, 10%, most allegations probably are not fabricated, right?
Well,
I think most allegations are not fabricated.
When we talk about numbers like that, when we go to, 10% of allegations being false, that's 1 in 10.
Yeah.
Are you willing to ruin someone's reputation based on an allegation that has a 1 in 10?
Well, so this is where we agree. This is what I was going to say. I was going to say that one of the implications of believing women or believing anyone, whether it's someone making an allegation of Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, racism, whatever it is absolutely these are serious issues. And I think probably another area we agree is a lot of them have been swept under the rug for a long time, partly because just sex is like a tough subject to talk about. People don't like talking about sex. And I said to you when we started this conversation, I think we should have more honest conversations about sex, because if we don't have honest conversations, we're not going to make progress. And sex and sexual harassment and sexual relationships have been a huge problem in the vegan movement and beyond. But the second thing is, I think you're right, where we also probably agree is that believing someone doesn't mean accepting without any evidence that all their allegations are true. It's taking it seriously enough that you look at the evidence. And I think this is kind of one of the areas where not just the vegan movement, but frankly, all of American society and probably Canadian society went off the rails, where we now have a president in the United States, or I should say a soon-to-be president, who's been found by a court of law to have sexually assaulted at least one woman, who bragged about, grabbing women by their private parts without consent.
Yeah.
We have a guy who was nominated for attorney general, who there was just a report this morning by Republican members of Congress finding that he solicited prostitution, committed statutory rape, and engaged in all forms of sexual and other misconduct. And he was going to be the attorney general of the United States. We have Pete Hegseth, the appointee for Minister of Defense. So at best, he cheated on his wife repeatedly while she was pregnant with their child, and at worst committed serial sexual assault. And no one cared in this country. And part of the reason for that is because I think the left became detached from reality and truth, and so lost credibility with the public at large. And I think that's a problem not just for feminists. I think it's a problem for vegans too, because I think vegans often make similar claims. We make exaggerated claims about animal agriculture, animal abuse, climate change, and animal agriculture that make us lose credibility with society at large. In the long term, that shoots us in the foot. And I think that's kind of what's happening with MeToo right now. And so this is kind of one area where I agree with you. And I'll give you even one concrete example. There were some activists who were in charge of this other grassroots pressure campaign group called CAFT. Have you heard of CAFT? Yeah, it's a coalition to abolish the fur trade. So I think this is all public, so I can share this. One of the allegations is against someone I've known for a long time, and I've considered a friend, for the record. And I'm not saying he did everything right. I think he probably did some things wrong. But this guy, Kevin Olaf, have you heard of Kevin's story?
No.
Not? Okay. Well, anyways, the point is, Kevin and his friend Tyler are both accused by other people I know, and some of whom I consider friends, very good friends of mine, of various forms of sexual misconduct. And I think one of the errors that Direct Action Ever made in addressing the situation was they did not actually go to the alleged perpetrator to just hear out their perspective on things before publicly sharing that they had been engaged in sexual abuse. And I think that's something that just doesn't work. You can't do that. You cannot post something publicly and potentially destroy someone's reputation without at least talking to them.
This is the result of stupid, radical, woke, left, intersectional feminism bullshit. They don't care.
Yeah, but don't you do the same thing on the other side?
No.
Like with Zionism, or I just think, okay, I mean, all right, to your credit, you did try to reach out to the women before you posted about, did you reach out to the woman in the Alex Bez situation too?
No, I wasn't able to get her contact info, but what Alex shared, and I spoke to him privately too, it was absolutely 100% damning. That was a situation where I wouldn't have even needed to. What she said versus what he was able to prove happened was, it's irrefutable proof she is completely and utterly full of shit.
Yeah.
I mean, he literally has voice messages of this girl saying, yeah, let's meet up for sex. Then they're in a room where there are multiple people around, where she's claiming she was being raped. Nobody heard anything. Nobody saw anything. And then the morning after, they're sharing text messages where clearly she wasn't raped. She said, sorry, I just wasn't in the mood and I felt guilty because, I actually have a boyfriend and I was cheating on him. Oh, well, there we go.
Also, the guy's trying to have sex with her in a public place, or like a quasi-public place around a bunch of other people, And
well, sure, but clearly
even
happened.
if she said, I want to have sex, and even if she had been in kind of, I think if she had been in some sort of relationship with him beforehand, that doesn't mean she consents on the spot, right? You could still, just because someone has previously said, I want to have sex, if they say no.
The text messages the day after prove that's not what happened. She was apologizing to him. She said, sorry, I wasn't in the mood because I felt guilty because I'm cheating on my boyfriend. It had nothing to do with, there are other people around. I thought what you did was inappropriate. I don't want to see you again. Nothing like that. It was all about, I felt guilty because I was cheating on my boyfriend. So that narrative is completely debunked based on the text message conversations.
Yeah. I mean, do you think it's possible that someone can both feel guilty about a situation, but also have not provided consent? Like, can't both of those things be true? Can't you feel guilty about...
That is in theory possible, but that's not what happened here. She said in the text messages, her problem for why she didn't want to have sex was she felt guilty for not cheating on her boyfriend. Had nothing to do with being pressured, had nothing to do with her just not being in the mood at the time, had nothing to do with other people, being in the room or near the room they were in where she felt uncomfortable. She said herself, I ended up feeling guilty because I'm cheating on my boyfriend, and I'm sorry. I gave you, she said, I'm sorry, I gave you expectations, and I'm sorry for leading you on, but that's the situation. And then Alex Bez said, oh, no problem, I understand. And then nothing happened until, like, again, a month or two later, where her boyfriend found out about this. And then suddenly, when her boyfriend finds out, she creates this whole, oh, I was raped story. Like, we know exactly what happened. So she's a liar. Did
she actually accuse him of rape specifically?
Yeah, she did.
I don't actually.
I'm pretty sure, like, even if she didn't, like, it's clear based on his testimony and her testimony, some amount of penetration was involved. So on the most technical level, it would be rape.
Yeah, I just don't recall, and I know there's litigation right now, which is really sad to me. And again, one of the reasons I want to have this conversation is, what's that?
It's between him and Cow Save, correct?
Correct. The Save movement. And I think some other folks too. I'm not sure. So again, I don't want to dive too much into specifics, but what I will say about that situation, which didn't as directly involve DXE, is Alex was someone who I think...
He's a personal friend of mine. I know. He's a great guy. I have hung out with him on quite a few... I haven't talked to him in quite a while. Part of it is because I've moved out of Toronto, so I haven't been able to, like, meet up with him and stuff. And he hasn't been as active on social media, or at least from what I can tell. So I haven't talked to him in quite a while, but he's a great guy. Everybody who knows him says he's a great guy. Friendly dude.
I think he's a friendly dude. I think he was an effective activist. I think he has a problem with boundaries. And honestly, you know, I should probably tell this to him directly. And I'm trying to think about whether it's, like, fair for me to bring this up without talking to him directly about this. It probably isn't. If you give me an introduction, I'll talk to him directly about this, because I just don't want to say something about him that's negative based on my experience until I talk to him directly about it, because I don't want to, like, feed rumor mills and smear campaigns, that sort of thing. But I had a direct experience with him where he crossed a boundary. Not with me necessarily, but that I directly observed that I thought was, like, not okay. Wasn't, for the record, and I hate to say, maybe I shouldn't even said this, honestly, because now people's imaginations are going to go wild. I will say it wasn't sexual assault. It was more of, like, a social boundary of, like, certain expectations I set for him that were not met in a way that was honestly kind of weird and creepy. And I honestly, though, I feel like I should even stop here, because I'm just like, imaginations are going to go wild now, and I haven't talked to him directly. And I'll apologize, both you and him, if something about what I just said is not correct or was just a misunderstanding. I will say one thing that influenced me was Jenny McQueen, who's not, like, someone who gets in fights. She made a pretty strong statement about Alex, and I was pretty surprised by that.
That was retarded.
Come on, Jenny is such a sweetheart. Are you kidding me?
I completely
do you know Jenny?
Disowned her at that point. Yeah, I know Jenny.
Jenny, she is, like, the sweetest person in the world. She, like, doesn't say anything negative about anybody.
Until she supports false rape accusations.
I mean,
I would not talk to her after that.
I think you should talk to her. I mean, Jenny's, like, one of the heroes in the movement. She's, like, a sweetheart. She never says anything negative about you. For example, she didn't say negative things about you. Like, I remember when other people were, like, saying all these negative things about you. From what I recall, she was like, "Oh no," you know. She always wants to bring everyone in together, and I was.
She wants to bring everyone together. That's why she supports false rape accusations.
Yeah,
right?
I don't think. I mean, certainly that's what she thinks she's doing, right? That's not, you know. Do you think that's what she's doing?
I don't think she's knowingly supporting false rape accusations. I think she's being ideologically captured by this intersectional feminism bullshit, where no matter what the circumstances are, believe all women.
Well, but it's
she, by the way, I can guarantee you, she is so close with Anita Krines and the rest of those, like, intersectional feminism activists.
Yeah,
I can guarantee you she was socially pressured to do shit like that.
Yeah, but Jenny's not captured in that way. And so, for example, on Gaza, she's kind of on your side. You know that, right? She gets in trouble for that. So she's not. She does think for herself, right? She's not. You know, so, like, she got called out because she didn't want to.
Well, look, she knows there are being so many activists who are being tossed out, me included, simply for, like, not agreeing with the Black Lives Matter movement.
Yeah.
I was critical of the stupid riots that occurred. I was critical of some of the stupid activism they were doing, where they were getting severed pig's head heads and
that was awful.
charging them through the street. Like, people
every animal rights
in the
activist
cow
should have
save
been opposed to
movement
that. That
were
was
like
bad,
disowning me over that. So I think she can get away with some of the stuff in Gaza, and I think part of it is because there's a lot of Jewish activists in the cow save movement. So she can get away with that stuff, and she knows it, but she knows she can't get away with supporting
Jenny's
not supporting false rape accusations.
I think you're making Jenny out to be more strategic and political than she is. Like, I think Jenny's just like a good-hearted person who genuinely tries to do the right thing, and she thought in that instance the right thing was to support the SAVE movement, especially when Alex sued SAVE. I mean, I think that's one of the great disasters in the animal rights movement, to see, people fighting. And honestly, this is the meta level point I wanted to try and bring to you, which is, I actually don't think people taking your tone are a bad thing. Like, I think, and I'd say the same about people on the other side who take a really strong tone, like on the pro MeToo side. I think it's useful for any society or community to have some people very strongly stating, what's considered an extreme position. I think your position is definitely considered an extreme position, even like what you just said about intersexual women. Really? You don't think most vegans would disagree with you about some of this stuff?
Well, it doesn't matter if most people disagree. What I would consider an extreme position would be a position that's just untenable, unreasonable, irrational. Like, most people could be irrational and consider a rational position extreme.
Yeah. By extreme, I don't mean to characterize, like, normatively, how legitimate the position is. I just mean in terms of just where you are in the movement. Like, if you had like a spatial representation, I'd say you're like over here, and then, some of the women, like maybe Anita Kreinch is over here. Actually, I for the record, I don't think Anita Kreinch is actually that ideological either. I mean, I've had conversations out, and
she is.
I don't know about that. I mean, I had a lot of personal conversations with her about Me Too, and she understands the excesses of the movement, especially now. It's many years after some of this stuff blew up. But I don't know how much I should get into this. But back in 2018, I mean, we had a situation where, I mean, I think it was completely good faith. And this is an example of like why these problems are so hard. But I had a very good faith disagree with Anita about essentially a situation where I thought the facts against any particular individual were not there to justify, removing him completely from a conference. And she took a different position. I think my view is, and obviously, like, this is what I think, and I'm sure she has a different position. I thought her position was not particularly fact-based. It was based on just fear. And my sense of Anita is that she's not a zealot about this. She's not an ideologue.
No, she is.
I don't think so. I think she was acting out of fear. And I think a lot of people are acting out of fear.
Ask Yourself?
I do know Ask Yourself. I wanted to have a podcast with him.
He was going to give a talk about formal logic, and he got banned by CowSave because he didn't support intersectional feminism and was against trans women competing in sports. Like, no, she is an ideologue when it comes to this, left-wing intersectional feminism bullcrap.
Okay, so there's two different definitions of ideologue. One is just about the positions the SAVE movement takes. The other is about kind of her own willingness to listen to contrary evidence and facts and logic. I think Anita might be described as an ideologue in the former sense, but not in the latter sense. I think she's actually a smart person who thinks about things in a nuanced way. And I think, and again, I could be wrong about this, and I hate to talk about Anita in any negative way. She's not here on this podcast. My sense is the reason she takes those positions when they seem extreme is often because she's afraid. She's afraid. Like, she has told me directly, I'm worried if we don't take the right position that all the work I've done will be erased from the face of the universe. It'll be completely destroyed because the same people have gone after Richard or gone after me in some cases. And for the record, I consider myself a pretty big supporter of the Me Too movement. I'm honestly, like, not to toot my own horn, but I've represented women who were victims of sexual assault and harassment for the movement before Me Too was a thing. And when it cost me hugely, like the leaders of many prominent animal welfare organizations, when I was a corporate litigator in Chicago, I represented a number of women who had allegations against men in the movement. And I got like canceled by them. Like, they went around trying to destroy me and destroy everything I was doing just because I represented them when I knew that the men were lying. Like, I 100% had evidence they were lying. And I won't even go into the exact details, but basically the entire reason I got involved in the case was just not because, I mean, obviously I care about the movement being a good place for women like my sister, like my mom, like my nieces. I want women to feel safe. But separately, I was just very convinced that these specific allegations against the men were true, and they were suing them for defamation because of things I'd seen in legal filings. They're basically lying in very obvious ways that I could see. So it's probably similar to maybe the way you felt after seeing some of these text messages, voice messages, whatever. You just became convinced. But for me, it was the opposite. I became convinced that some of these men were up to bad things. But I think there's part of the problem is that people are so scared to be on the wrong side of these issues. And probably a lot of people listening to this podcast have had this experience where, there's some sexual harassment, misconduct dispute, and you're like, that doesn't seem right to me, or that doesn't seem, or even if it does seem right, it doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal. And if you say those words, it doesn't seem like that big of a deal. If you do not quickly escalate to comparing everything to Harvey Weinstein, you're just canceled, right? Someone makes like an off-color joke that they don't even realize is off-color, and suddenly they're equivalent to Harvey Weinstein, right? That's kind of the problem I see. And sometimes I feel like you do that. Like, I think you've turned, for example, anyone who's supportive of MeToo into an ideological intersectional feminist who just doesn't care about anything other than their ideology. I don't think that's true. And I think you just did that with Anita, frankly. Maybe you've done that to me. And I like to think I'm pretty nuanced and, not that ideological, but maybe I am. But I also think you've kind of done that with Gaza too. Like the people who are free Palestine, to me, you've grouped them all into one camp.
They're all anti-Semites.
The nuance. But they're 100%
not. Of them are anti-Semites. No, they are.
Richard, that's like 1/3 of the entire American public. You realize that, right? You think 1/3 of the American public is anti-Semitic?
Yes.
Really?
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
Look, anti-Semitism is widespread.
That.
There's a reason why the Nazis were able to get away with the Holocaust for so long. Yeah. Anti-Semitism is extremely widespread. It's existed in America for a very long time. Extreme levels of racism have existed for a very long time. Hitler got his idea of exterminating the Jews and exterminating certain groups of people from the United States because we were the ones supporting eugenics programs. Sorry?
Is Jon Stewart an anti-Semite? He's a Jew.
Who's that?
Supported Jewish causes. He's the the comedian who does the Daily Show. Jon Stewart. He supports the Free Palestine movement.
Well, yeah, it's called. You can't. I don't know why people bring this up. Is Tommy Sotomayor not racist against black people because he's black? This is a black guy who goes around saying black people, particularly women, are monkeys and they need to be enslaved again because black people are useless for society. Okay. They cause nothing but trouble, and the only time they're useful is when they're enslaved. Then they can be put to work.
Okay, fair enough.
I don't care what race like somebody is. I don't care if they're Jewish, black, Asian. You can be racist against your own race.
That's fair. I agree. You can be. I agree. And look, I'm Chinese, brother. There are a lot of self-loathing Chinese people. This is kind of a thing we're known for. But someone like Jon Stewart and Ezra Klein, these are Jewish people. And I'm not just saying, are they anti-Semites because they're part of the Free Palestine movement to some degree and they're Jewish. But because if you look at their positions, they're not saying things like what you just described for this black man describing black people as monkeys. They're just saying things like, yeah, I think the Israeli government is committing war crimes. I think that's a fair thing to say. And I think just because someone says that and thinks we should free Palestine and give people the right to self-representation, that doesn't make them anti-Semitic. And this is the sort of escalation in rhetoric.
They're promoting pro-Palestinian propaganda.
I see you doing exactly the same thing the people in the MeToo movement and the free...
So look, they fall into two categories.
Wait, just to be clear.
They fall into two categories.
No, let's just narrow it into one.
They're either useful idiots or they are genuinely anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
Jon Stewart might be a useful idiot, but that is pro-Palestinian propaganda.
Okay. And is that just
what does he mean by
says...
Israel is committing war crimes? Every war, there have been war crimes committed. I think the most justifiable war in recent memory would probably be like World War II, where, we really needed to fight the Germans. I don't think anybody disagrees that the U.S. should have gotten involved in Germany. You don't think the U.S. committed war crimes?
It did.
Absolutely. Obviously, that's going to happen to some extent, but what is meant by that?
Why is it anti-Semitic just to point that out?
Well, what utility does it have? Like, what is it doing for you? What do you mean by that? Like,
Because
when you say Israel's committing war crimes, wait. When you're saying Israel's committing war crimes in Gaza, there is a clear implication that there is some sort of top-down order from like Netanyahu or generals within the military saying, "Yeah, exterminate civilians. Who cares if you like wipe out, like a few Palestinian civilians? Just blow them up. Just blow them up." That's the implication. And there is no evidence for that whatsoever. There's every piece of evidence that they're trying to minimize civilian casualties. And by the way, this whole narrative that Israel isn't using discriminatory tactics when they're waging warfare, please explain to me why they have the best militant to civilian casualty ratio of any military that has ever engaged in urban warfare. You don't hear any of these people claiming, America is like this totalitarian dictatorship that tries to commit genocides in every single conflict. No, because it wouldn't make any sense. That's just stupid, and they know it. They just know they can get away with it when they're talking about Jews, because everyone hates Jews. Anti-Semitism is such a popular thing, they can get away with saying stupid shit like that. Yeah, even though the data is not on their side. They have the best militant to civilian casualty ratio of any military. If they have that epistemic standard that the military that has the best militant to civilian casualty ratio in urban warfare is committing a genocide, then literally every single military that has ever engaged in urban warfare is committing a genocide. Are they criticizing every other military? No. For some reason, it's just the Jews. What a coincidence.
So, okay, let me just make 2 points, and the second one might be a question. The first point is, the implication is, if it is the case that most major modern kind of industrial states committing wars, and frankly, probably even non-industrial states committing wars, have committed war crimes, why are you pointing out? I think the answer is because we should do better. If we all agree in sober times when we're able to calmly reflect
only the Jews have to do better.
Let me just finish.
Nobody talked about the genocide in Syria, where over 350,000 civilians
certainly people
were
criticize the United States in Iraq. People criticize the United States in Afghanistan.
No one's talking about Yemen.
The United States in Vietnam.
No one's talking about any of that. For some reason, only the Jews have to do better. Like, again, I wonder why.
Yeah. So, okay. And let me just acknowledge, I think one point I agree with you on, and I still haven't done this, and I'm kind of honestly a little ashamed of myself. I do think anti-Semitism is a huge problem in the animal rights movement and beyond, and I should do more about that. And like, I've seen it, I've seen comments and statements both within the animal rights movement and outside of the movement that were super objectionable. I do not think it's anti-Semitic simply to say that Israel is committing war crimes, or specifically the Israeli government, especially if someone narrows it to say, Netanyahu, the IDF are committing war crimes, because I think that's just true. It absolutely is true. I mean, it's just really hard to argue that it's not true.
Like, what is meant by that? The implication is there is an order from the top down that they're committing war crimes. That's the implication.
That's not necessarily true.
They have no evidence for that claim whatsoever. It could just be negligence.
So there's a proportionality requirement. I'm not a specialist in international law, but I did take international law, and I actually studied under Eric Posner as one of the leading figures in this area about the proportional use of force. But even to the extent you have a purely military target, there has to be proportionality consideration that's made, and you have to take reasonable precautionary measures to prevent civilian casualties if you can avoid them. And when the Israeli government is telling everyone to flee south to safer areas, and then dropping 2,000-pound bombs in those exact areas, they absolutely are. Did I ever share with you the New York Times visual investigation about this? No.
They're not doing that.
This is 100% verified.
Why? Okay, please explain to me. If they're dropping 2,000-pound bombs in encampments that are designated safe zones, why aren't you seeing like daily fatality figures where 500, 1,000, 1,500 civilians die? No, you're only hearing stories like
it's in safe zones. It's apartment complexes, schools, other places.
These safe zones are massive, by the way. They're huge. So if there's
an underground, you cannot declare a safe zone and then drop a bomb that's used to indiscriminately blow away.
Hamas embeds itself in civilian infrastructure. Listen, Hamas embeds itself in the laws of war. Listen. No, it's not. Hamas embeds itself in civilian infrastructure. If they see that there is a high-value Hamas target that is underground in a tunnel, the only way to take them out is by using a 2,000-pound bunker buster. And people also don't understand how these bombs work. they actually penetrate deep underground. They don't explode at the surface. So that's another aspect to consider. But when you're talking about
but when you have a 2,000-pound bomb, I know that's true. You're still going to blow away a huge building. I mean, it's not even a huge building, a huge block. And you see, like, what is it, like one in two buildings in Gaza has been blown to smithereens?
The way you're talking about
I like how every conversation we have ends up being about Gaza.
Listen, the way you're
even
talking
when we try
about
to talk
this
about something
makes
else.
it sound as though there's a big civilian encampment with hundreds of people, and then there's one Hamas dipshit there, and then Israel just drops a 2,000-pound bomb and blows everybody away. That is not what's happening. Clearly, you would hear news stories about like 500 people in an encampment were instantly evaporated by a high-yield explosive that Israel just blew up in the middle of the town. Clearly, they're using discriminatory tactics. If they're not, and they're doing this kind of shit, please explain to me why they have the best militant to civilian casualty ratio of any military. Like, imagine
and
if Israel is wiping out like 500, civilians in an encampment.
Yeah.
What is the United States doing? And by the way, there's especially in the Vietnam War, you could make a way more plausible case that the United States was committing war crimes, and that was like a top-down initiative. When you talk about some of the actual orders they were given, if there was like any intelligence that there was Viet Cong in a village, they were told just blow everyone away, shoot everybody. Doesn't matter who. There's a way more plausible case that the United States.
You have better examples like Hiroshima and Nagasaki, where they literally just blew away the entire city.
That was not a war crime.
I disagree, but
no, Nagasaki was not a war crime. They gave 2 weeks notice. They gave out pamphlets in Japanese telling everybody to evacuate. These were also centers where they were making military equipment. They told everyone to evacuate, and they killed more Japanese in the other bombings than they did with the nukes. The Japanese would not capitulate.
The firebombing of Tokyo, for example.
They said they were going to keep fighting until the last man. Based on all the intelligence they have, they use every reasonable measure to try to get Japan to capitulate. If they didn't use the nuclear bombs, Japan would have never surrendered, and there would have been more civilian casualties anyway.
Yeah. By the way, let me just say right now, if I've offended anyone, including you, I don't think you were offended because you're not very easily offended. When I laugh about these situations, I don't mean to laugh about things like war crimes and bombings and genocide. I'm laughing because of the meta level kind of experience I'm having, which it may be inappropriate for me to experience that on the meta level when we're talking about substantive issues that are really serious, like sexual assault and harassment. But if someone's pissed off at me for laughing, fair enough. Maybe I shouldn't laugh. But what I'll say about this is, I don't want to. Again, as a sexual misconduct, I don't personally think it's super important to get into specific facts of each particular scenario, but rather to figure out, like, at a meta level, what are the right norms for us to set for a movement.
Well,
and
we already have established norms on this, and it's just that left-wing intersectional feminists go completely away from those norms. How it's being drilled into our head with a criminal justice system, innocent until proven guilty. Look at the evidence, hear both sides out, but they don't care. Do you think people can engage in misconduct that's short of criminal conduct? That's still something to be addressed by the movement? Well, certainly. But again, just like harassment. Harassment's not criminal. Well, a lot of times it's just a civil issue. Well, listen, when we're talking about nothing but allegations that cannot be proven, where you have no corroborating evidence. Okay, if somebody spanks your ass, and you make this accusation that, he did that inappropriately. I think it's fine. That's happened to me many times. A lot of people spank my ass inappropriately. We can go into this. Women and men. Well, what's never talked about is a lot of women are actually very touchy. It's just that a lot of dudes don't really care, but women care a lot more. Well, women also don't rape men very often. So, I think there's less of a predatory concern. Sure. You're a lot bigger than me, but you and I tend to be a little bigger. I'm not nearly as big as you, off the record. Look, I think I'm pretty big too, and I'm not as. And I could see women being more concerned about a slap to the ass than you or I would. To be blunt, I just don't think you're going to feel very afraid if someone slaps you on the ass, Richard. If you said you're afraid, I wouldn't necessarily believe you. I understand there's less of a threat involved.
Yeah.
But
I mean, you've got to be like, what, 250? How big are you?
No, I'm about 215, 220 right now.
250? Wow. Okay. You just look bigger than you are. How tall are you? You're tall. I met you. You're 6'3"? You're only 215?
Yeah.
Wow. You're not that much heavier than me somehow.
Yeah.
Because you're way taller than me and way buffer than me. So I guess you're just lean. Because I'm like
I'm fairly lean.
5'9".
I dieted for a few months.
Oh, yeah? Oh, nice. So anyways, my point
well,
is...
I was about to finish a point.
Sorry.
Like,
please, continue.
when it comes to some of these more less serious allegations, like, I don't know, somebody spanked you on the ass, somebody touched you in a way that you don't like.
Or just made an off-color joke.
Yeah, I don't know why we can't just be civil about this and, like, just tell somebody and say, hey, I don't like that you said that. Like, could you maybe be a little more appropriate around me, or don't touch me like that? I don't appreciate it.
Well, the reason we can't is because of people like you.
No.
Yeah, it is. Because you make it unsafe to have these conversations.
No, I don't.
I'm half kidding. No.
Look, I've never...
People are scared to talk to you, Richard.
I've never firebombed anybody's house because I got upset with them. Yeah, but you throw verbal
firebombs at people and they're scared. And that makes everyone scared. So part of it is, I think... Okay, let me caveat the position, because I actually don't mean that literally, because I think it's not so much that I think you are the problem, because I don't. And I actually think you served as, in many ways, a useful, almost like an antibody for the movement, because you're pretty honest. And so, like, when the movement's doing wild stuff that everyone else is like scared to talk about, you talk about it. And the problem is, I think it's almost like the only position people are taking is the virus or the antibody, and no one's realizing, no, there's like a system that all of us should be a part of. And I think the antibody has a very important function. And sometimes even a virus is an important function. You know, like a lot of vaccines, for example, are just like dead viruses that provoke an antibody response, and they just make sure everything's working all right in the system. The problem is the rhetoric is all about the antibody and the virus. Sorry, this metaphor is terrible. It probably makes no sense to anyone. I don't know if it makes any sense to you, but the rhetoric is all around the antibody and the virus and not at all about the actual biological system we're trying to defend. In other words, I think what's happened in the animal rights movement, as in other positions, is the extreme positions are the only positions people imagine even existing in the world. Like, you're either an anti-Semite or you're a proponent of genocide. You're either a Harvey Weinstein-like sexual predator, or you're a radical, man-hating feminist who thinks every man is a predator, right? You know, like Andrea Dworkin style. Although, I mean, I actually think Andrea Dworkin's position is a little much more nuanced. Do you know who Andrea Dworkin is? She's the one who's famous for saying all sex is rape. Like, she was an intersectional feminist who said, like, all sex is rape, even consensual sex. Because the idea behind it is, it's not a completely ridiculous idea, because the idea is basically...
No, it's ridiculous. It's fucking stupid.
You didn't even hear the position. How do you know it's stupid?
Consensual sex is non-consensual. That's that's a direct contradiction.
No,
you're making a proposition and its negation immediately.
Okay. I'm not saying I disagree with it, but I don't think it's stupid. Andrea Dworkin's a really smart person.
It's internally incoherent.
Well, a lot of things appear internally incoherent.
No, it's internally incoherent. How can consensual sex be non-consensual?
Because there's a power dynamic that shapes women's ability to consent. Like, the best example of this is like Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings.
No. Then you're making a completely different claim. Then you should... Okay. No, then you're making a completely different claim. Then it wouldn't be consensual sex. This is somebody who has absolutely no ability to reason and make an argument. If she wanted to say... a lot of sex that seems to be consensual isn't, that's a much different thing to say than to make a stupid fucking argument that consensual sex is non-consensual. That's stupid. That's my fault. She's an idiot and no ability to reason.
No. I don't think she's an idiot, and I've read her work, and I think she's quite intelligent. I disagree with her on a lot of things, including this position. But my point is, there's like a lot of nuance in these positions, and too often, and I'm not even saying there isn't some value in some people, like almost like litigators. I think there's value in litigators on both sides, bashing it out. But then I think the jury should deliberate in a more thoughtful way. And the problem with American society and probably global society is all we have is litigators. What's that?
They're all dumb.
No, the jurors are not dumb. You're saying
no, jurors are stupid.
That's not true. They acquitted me. I guess they convicted me sometimes too.
Yeah, they're dumb.
Well, they acquitted us more times. We've had, well, that's not true. We're 50-50. They've acquitted us half the time, and we've won them over half the time. I will say the jurors are a lot smarter than the public at large, though, because when we've gotten a chance to talk to people about animal rights specifically, and I think this is true of other issues too. I think it's true of MeToo. I think it's true of Gaza. I think when you actually get a chance to sit down with folks and have real conversations, and you can set up some deliberative norms, like in the jury, one of the things the judge will do. Now, judges are super biased, and there's all these broken aspects of the legal system. But one good thing about a legal system is the judges tell people to leave your biases outside of this and listen to everyone. Like, listen to the evidence, be as objective as possible. It's your obligation to be impartial. I actually think the bigger problem is the judges don't give themselves that same instruction, and they don't give the prosecutors that instruction. But the juries, there's a lot of bias in the system that prevents them from hearing the right evidence. And that's certainly true in my cases. Like, they always exclude all the animal cruelty evidence. It's not fair at all. Like, if you're going to charge me with a crime for rescuing an animal, you should be able to hear why I did it, right? But when they're actually given even some semblance of a story as to why we did what we did, it turns out when human beings get a chance to deliberate, think, look at the evidence, they often come to good answers, and answers that are very contrary to social norms generally, right? Because when you talk about places like Merced County, California, or Beaver County, Utah, where we've won these animal rights trials on behalf of veganism, not one of these people is even vegetarian. Not one of these people even knows a vegan. Like, not one of these people is frankly even like a leftist. They're all just, Trump supporting Mormons in Southern Utah. And yet, even in that context, when you give people the right information, give them a chance to deliberate, they often get to good answers. They get to the right answers in these questions. And I think the same would be true of MeToo. The same would be true of Gaza, all these issues. If we could turn down the volume a little bit and ask everyone to just look at the evidence. And I do think there's value. And certainly, look, from a social media perspective, the problem is you get a lot more attention if you make the most extravagant demands. I've seen this myself. Like, the more you shout something, this is like Destiny style. Like, every video he makes is about someone shouting at someone, right? And it does get a lot of clicks. It gets a lot of eyeballs because it creates anxiety in people. People want to see. It's kind of like the rubberneck syndrome. When you see a car accident, you can't stop watching it. But I'm not saying there's no value in that at all, because sometimes an issue needs attention. And I think one of your geniuses is you've used the fact that you often take, in my view, extreme, again, not extreme in the sense that I think you're irrational, but extreme in the sense that your position is like a fringe position, including on veganism. Like, you've made a lot of extreme statements about veganism. They're actually very helpful because they provoke attention. But that can't be the way our entire society deliberates. The way we deliberate should be more like a calm state jury looking at the evidence on all sides and not immediately accusing people of anti-Semitism or Islamophobia or sexual harassment or misconduct.
I accuse people of these things when the evidence supports the hypothesis.
Yeah, I do think you are more evidence-based than a lot of folks on the other side. I think there are a lot of people on your side of these debates that are not very evidence-based. I also think you tend to leap to stronger conclusions than the evidence justifies. So, for example, on this notion that, basically everybody who supports the Free Palestine movement is anti-Semitic. I mean,
yeah, they are.
You're basically saying the UN Declaration of Human Rights is anti-Semitic, because the UN Declaration of Human Rights says the right to self-determination exists for all people everywhere.
Palestinians don't want self-determination. They've had that opportunity. They've had that opportunity since the 1930s. They've never wanted self-determination. Yeah. By the way, they already have their state. It's called Jordan. Majority of Jordanians are Palestinian. They already have their own state. But
that's not the people in Gaza, the West Bank.
They refuse. Yeah. They're just completely full of shit. It's a cynical ploy just to kill more Jews.
Do you think if we could create a space where the movement could, I'm not saying to silence strong voices like yours, but also create a space. And honestly, I almost feel like our conversations have been that space, because I don't know how you feel about our conversations, but I actually don't feel very offended by anything you said. I actually think, I think our conversations are pretty useful. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Do you think the movement should create spaces where we have more calm, deliberative discussions about these hot button issues and try to reach common ground?
Well, that's impossible given the type of people who end up getting in the activist movement.
Like Jenny McQueen.
The reality is,
really, like Jenny McQueen. You don't think you can have a calm, rational conversation with Jenny McQueen?
Listen.
She's such a sweetheart. She's like the nicest person in the world.
Listen, the animal rights movement has been infiltrated with crazy left-wing intersectional feminist dipshits like Darren Chang, who, by the way, is a racist. He hates white people. He hates Jews. He's also a narcissist. He's manipulative as shit. He tries to promote this kind of crap so that he can push people out that he doesn't like. Yeah. He does this to just create a situation where he has the most amount of social power.
But that's
possible.
not most people. That's like, I mean, I'm not even saying that's true of Darren Chang, for the record. I don't know. I mean, I don't know Darren well enough to say for sure. I think Durand is engaged in counterproductive behavior for sure. But that's not most vegans, though. Would you agree with that?
No, it's not most vegans, but they support an ideology that empowers people like that. And again, they end up becoming useful idiots for movements
but this
like
is the thing.
this.
They don't. I just know. Because like even Anita, who you say is like this ideologue, a lot of what she does. Okay. And I'm sorry, like Anita, I'm apologizing ahead of time if I mischaracterize your position at all. I think Anita is like an amazing activist. I think she's like legendary and she's incredibly brave, super smart, has done extraordinary work. But I think when she takes a lot of the positions that you see as being kind of a useful idiot or an ideologue, she's doing it out of fear. I'm 100% sure about that because
That's
I've
what
had conversations
intersectional
about
feminism does. It makes everybody afraid. You can't question anything. You're immediately a bigot. If you go outside of the narrative, you're a racist, you're a bigot, you support white supremacy, you hate women. That's what it does.
Aren't you doing the same thing on Gaza, though? Like, if you don't agree with you, you're a bigot.
Movements. Look at all these fascist movements. Look what happened under communism. You want to make money? You have a problem with everybody making the same. Oh, you're a capitalist pig dog. Oh, you're trying
and then they kill people.
Yeah, and then they kill people.
That happened to my family, in China.
This is the type of ideology that creates a situation where nobody can speak out, nobody can have a sane, rational discussion. It's a purity test constantly, and if you fail the purity test, you get excised.
You get kicked out. Yeah.
That's why people are afraid to speak out. That's why people go along with these ridiculous narratives where Alex Bez has to get kicked out of the movement. Everybody has to agree, or else they're a white supremacist, like rape apologist. It's stupid. So, like, we have to get rid of the stupid intersectional feminist ideology. We have to have sane, rational conversations. We have to talk about the specifics of each situation. We have to look at the evidence. And if the evidence doesn't conclusively point to, somebody being in the wrong, somebody being in the right, you're going to have to say, look, if you two don't get along, then separate. Don't go to the same events. If the evidence does show in favor of one view, you're going to have to come to the conclusion, look, this person lied. Fuck off. You're an asshole. We don't want you at events because you're a lying shithead who spreads false rape accusations. If the evidence points in another direction where the person actually did something wrong, look, you're a dickhead. Get the fuck out. And maybe if it leads, if it goes to the point of criminal, then contact the police, show them the evidence, and hopefully they can get a conviction. But we can't have that because intersectional feminism.
Yeah, I think there's a third path. And that third path is restorative justice, which I don't know what you think of restorative justice or whether you've read about it. But I mean, the model historically is kind of the Truth and Justice Commissions in South Africa, post-apartheid, which I will say it's been less successful recently than it was seen like 10 years ago, because there's still a lot of racial acrimony in South Africa. But still, it's a lot better than a lot of other places. Like if you look at a lot of other post-colonial states, like the conflicts that existed and just how much it's destroyed entire societies, right? Just South Africa is a pretty model state in that regard. And part of what they did is they said, look, our goal is to reach truth and reconciliation. That's why it's called the Truth and Reconciliation process. It's not about guilt or shame or exile, excommunication, or punishment. And I think our entire criminal justice system, frankly, should be moving in that direction. Our entire culture should be moving in that direction. And if we as a movement, like I think one of the reasons people might be making exaggerated claims about men that you ultimately conclude are bad faith is because they're so frantic and they feel like they have to litigate the case. They cannot allow for any sort of weakness in their case or any sort of confusion or doubt, because it's an adversarial process. And I know this because this is what happens in litigation. When you're a lawyer, like even if people are willing to talk and work it out before a lawsuit, once you're in a lawsuit, once you're in that battle in the courtroom, people start polarizing. They start kind of moving into their separate positions and they won't budge. Even if they know they should, even if the facts suggest they should, they will not. And it causes these enduring conflicts that never get resolved. Well, if we could create a more restorative process where people felt open, to share even their doubts. Like I, as someone who's been pretty supportive of women and also had, lots of people say nasty things about me, to be fair. If I cannot feel safe saying like, oh, can I hear more about this? Right. And or asking a question like, is canceling someone the only way we could approach this? Right. And,
with intersectional
I
feminism,
should be able to ask those questions, and I'm not right now allowed to. But it's not because most people don't think we should be able to ask those questions. I think most people believe that on all sides, but I think by that same logic, I also think people should be entitled to ask you questions and say, like, is it really the case that every person in the Free Palestine movement is an anti-Semite, and feel safe to do that? Like, I feel confident doing that, partly because we have a relationship and because, I'm a relatively privileged, confident person. But I want to make sure someone else can ask you that same question and say, man, I don't know if everybody.
People ask
even
me
if
that all the time, and I explain why I hold that view.
And that's fair. And I think it's actually it's fair for you to hold that view. The problem is when you hold that view in a way that creates fear, that people feel like they cannot question the narrative. That's the problem. And I think what happens is the movement and human society like diverge into these two camps. And each camps are like these little silos where you cannot deviate from, like, and I know this is not what you're trying to do, because frankly, whatever silo you are in, you always deviate from it, including the vegan silo. Like, you've deviated from the vegan silo in a lot of ways, which is something I think you should be proud of. I mean, I think it's one of the things that's great about you. But most other people feel stuck in their silo and feel like, all right, if I'm on the, if I'm on the pro-Israel side, or I'm concerned about anti-Semitism side, I have to be all in, and I can't question anything anyone says. And the more extreme position, the position, it's most like the more I have to accept it, because if it's an extreme allegation, it's like if I question it, I'm no longer part of the tribe. And the same thing is true on the other side. And what I would like us to do is find a place. I'm not even saying let's silence the bomb throwers, because again, I think the bomb throwers actually are useful inoculation. Like, I think, it's useful to have some people who are ranting about everything. But in the long term, we have to make space for the non-ranters to come together and look at facts in a deliberative and calm way and say, okay, what is the right thing to do to help all of us move forward together? Does that seem reasonable to you, or is that silly?
Oh, that's perfectly reasonable. The problem is everyone's a goddamn chimpanzee. And human beings are inherently tribal.
You are a speciesist, Richard. There's nothing wrong with being a chimpanzee.
Yeah, there is. Chimps are assholes. And
come on now.
Everybody is a goddamn chimpanzee. Human beings are inherently tribal. And this is why there's bullshit like communism, intersectional feminism, right-wing fascism, KKK, neo-Nazis. This is why all these groups pop up. And most people are chimps. Most people can't have these nuanced conversations. And especially when you allow some of these ridiculous ideologies like intersectional feminism to just permeate through the animal rights movement, good luck having a nuanced conversation about any of these topics.
Do you think it's worth trying? I mean, we've had nuanced conversations about this. Are we just unique?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I think other people want to have these conversations, and I even think the fact that a lot of people listen to our conversations
would be willing to if they gave up this bullshit intersectional feminism crap, or if you convince people not to be ideologically overtaken and not be fearful of these dipshits, like especially intersectional feminism. They're the most weak pussies imaginable. They can't do anything to you but make stupid
Richard, that's sexist and speciesist. Don't call people the P word. I'm calling you out right now on my show.
I don't know. They're like, should I call them cotton balls or something? Like, they're pushovers.
Yeah, I'm actually not that offended. And I think language, I mean, like I'm first of all, it's easy for me not to be offended. I'm neither a cat nor a woman, so I won't care. So maybe someone else is offended, but I'm not offended. I mean, I see people in three camps. All right. There is one camp that is just too busy. And they generally, and especially in activist movements like the vegan movement, or movements that are trying to make the world a better place, they will, because they're busy and they don't have time to dive into things, they take the position that seems like the moral position. And that's usually on the side of the vulnerable party or the vulnerable group. So the person of color, the woman, the trans person, whatever it is. So that's one camp of people who genuinely believe they're doing something right and they're amplifying a false narrative or something that's just a little over the top. But it's because they just don't have time. And we need to give people time. And one solution to that is like having more thoughtful conversations like this. Partly it's just because there's so few people having
time. They look.
No, it absolutely is. There's so many people I've talked to who said oh, wow, after I listened to like a more nuanced conversation, whether it's about Gaza or about MeToo or about racism, I have like a more thoughtful perspective.
Why so example, are they giving an opinion in the first place? They have some
because they think it's the right thing to do. Because that's what you do for veganism.
No,
Just like, no, you see something on social media about someone kicking a dog and you post in support of it because you don't think people should kick dogs. And you don't know, like, oh, that was like a CGI image or that was like a fake image, you know? People just think they're doing the right thing.
You're missing the point. Look, if you don't know anything about a situation, if there is just simply an accusation, the default position is, I don't know. I don't have an opinion. I don't know if it's true or not.
Do you look into every
then
allegation of animal abuse?
Sorry?
Yeah. Do you look into every allegation of animal abuse out there before repeating it and saying, you know, like ventilation shutdown? Like, I don't know how you looked into ventilation shutdown. Like, this is the allegation that factory farmers are roasting animals alive. Have you looked into that, or you just kind of repeat it? I think most people just kind of repeat it. They accept it's probably true.
No. Like, if I see evidence of it, then I will say, like, I don't know if, I don't know, like cow farmers are having sex with their cows or something. Mm-hmm. I'm sure some do. Like zoophilia.
Sexual assault of cows is routinely. I mean, it's impregnation, for example.
That's inherent within the system. So I know about that. I have evidence for it. That's why I say it. But if there's just like an allegation that Israel's committing war crimes or they're using starvation, I don't immediately take a position on that until I see the evidence. All of these people who are saying, oh, Israel's committing war crimes or this guy's a rapist without knowing anything about the situation, they're either ideologues, inherently anti-Semitic, inherently, what's the reverse of...
Islamophobic?
No, what's the reverse of, they're just man-haters, misandrous.
Oh, misandrous,
Yeah, like, why would you take a position on something you don't know anything about? It's just nonsense. So
because you're trying to do the right thing and you trust the other people who said these things.
No, that's stupid. That's idiotic.
That's the way human beings are. We trust what other people say. If someone says there's a tiger around the corner, you're probably going to trust them, you know? Because that's the way human beings have operated.
People either have an inherent bias or they're ideologues. The inherent bias that a lot of people have is they have a bias against Israel. They have a bias against Jews. They have a bias against men. They're part of a group that has an inherent bias, like intersectional feminists. And then they repeat nonsense they hear without any evidence, without any reasoning, and they just immediately believe it's true because of those biases.
Yeah, I think it's not a bias. It's conformity plus a desire to do the right thing and good. I think a lot of people will repeat something just because there's someone else in the network who they trust on some level who said this animal was abused.
I'll dispel that immediately. When you heard Haitians were eating cats and dogs, did you immediately start posting on social media, oh my God, everybody, Haitians are eating cats and dogs? What do you think?
No, but that's not someone I trust, right? I don't trust JD Vance or Donald Trump. Yeah.
Who do you think are the people who would believe that bullshit? Racists, white supremacists, far right-wing conservatives that hate fucking immigrants. So,
but it depends a lot on the
people who believe this shit.
So, if I told you Chinese people were eating cats and dogs, would you believe me?
Well, I've seen it.
Yeah, but if I just told you and you only had evidence from me saying this, you wouldn't necessarily say like, "Oh, it's racist."
I would have an agnostic position.
If I told you, I mean, you wouldn't trust me based on what you've heard. That's disappointing to me. You don't trust me, Richard.
Well, I would take an agnostic. Like, if somebody were to say Chinese people eat babies, probably not. Like, I'd take.
They eat dog babies.
Like,
for sure.
Eat everything, but I mean, that's a little extreme.
I mean, they eat animal babies all the time. Then again, so do Americans. I mean, we're all eating babies.
So, look, when people make these claims, like, oh, this guy's a rapist, the logical, rational thing to do is to say, well, I'll look into it. I don't know. I'm not going to post on social media condemning anybody. But they don't. And it's either because they're misandrous, they have some sort of bias against men, just like how the people talking about, Haitians eating cats and dogs, they have a bias against black people and immigrants. Or they're part of a group that promotes that inherent bias, like intersectional feminism.
You are like one of the most interesting people I know. Because your ability to bring like a constellation of different views and political camps together is pretty uncanny. Because the Venn diagram of people who like think what Trump and Vance did of Haitian immigrants is super fucked up, and the people who think intersectional feminists are super fucked up, that's a pretty small intersection of Venn diagrams right there. And somehow you're right there. You're like the one guy at the intersection of those things.
Well, look,
which is one of the reasons it's fun talking to you, because I never know what to expect out of you.
People who magnify, you know, disinformation, they're not doing it out of like this idea that, oh, I'm doing the right thing. They're doing it because they have some sort of inherent bias, or they're part of a group that demands it.
So second part, I agree with. I'm the first part, I'm not even sure I agree with that. Even honestly, with respect to the Trump and Vance allegations, I think a lot of people repeated that allegation. You know, they probably had a genuine concern that animals are being eaten, and you know, was there at some level some bias? I mean, everybody's biased in some ways, and I think that I'm sure a lot of people who shared that particular allegation probably were motivated in part by, you know, but I think a lot of people probably just thought, like, I am in Trump's camp. I trust him. I don't like the idea that dogs and cats could be killed and eaten, which is totally hypocritical because obviously you and I know that, you know, all these people are so upset about dogs and cats being killed. Or
Asian immigrants are doing it. Like the type of people who would believe Trump are also the type of people who would probably share his views on immigration and are racist and shit.
I mean, but racism, like a lot of other systemic biases, I mean, I think a lot of it doesn't come from any sort of active malice, which is in many ways what makes it more insidious, because it comes from people who are genuinely trying to do the right thing. And I think that the difficulty is it's really hard to see.
Haitians are eating cats and dogs are trying to do the right thing.
I disagree with that so much. I think almost everybody, including Mao. I mean, we're going to come back to Mao again. Look, I think Mao was trying to do the right thing, you know?
No, he wasn't.
I think most people...
no, he wasn't.
I think... No, if
the guy was an absolute psychopath.
No, but if you look at the people who studied evil, so you should, if you haven't read this book by Jonathan Glover called Humanity, A History of Atrocity, I think is the name of the book. It's this fascinating examination of atrocities. And one of the points he makes is that most of the worst atrocities in history have been committed by people who believe they're doing the right thing. Because that's what allows you to overcome all your intuitions that suggest you're doing the wrong thing, because you have this higher purpose. You just think, let the ends justify the means. And this is why I think violence is so concerning, because once you start allowing violence, you allow these ideologues and to really kind of manipulate the rest of the public into going along with something because they think it's the right thing. So one of the most astonishing things about the Nazis, for example, is you and I've blogged about this. When you look at, I think it's Himmler's, or maybe it's, I forget which one of the perpetrators of the Holocaust is writing about kind of why they have to gas all these children to death. And he writes explicitly, basically, it's their children or ours. You know, I know this is hard. I don't like the idea of gassing Jewish children, but they're going to kill the children of Germany. And this is, and frankly, at this point, by the point that they had the final solution, they were thinking, well, we've already started killing them, and so they're certainly going to kill us now. If we don't wipe out their children now, they will wipe out ours, because they will have an animus towards Germany for 100 generations. So we just have to wipe them out. And it's similar to the argument that Israel is making with Palestine, where they say, if we don't wipe these people out, you know,
well, they're not wiping anybody out.
Okay, but setting aside factually whether they're wiping people out or not, which we can disagree about to some degree. I'm not saying they're wiping all the Palestinians out, but the point is, even the Nazis, when you look at their internal rhetoric, if you look at, like, if you could put like a little neural implant into Hitler's brain or Himmler's brain, or who's the person who Hannah Arendt write about? Oh gosh, it's the trial of, anyways, I forget who it is, but basically the person who the trials in Nuremberg, Hannah Arendt, went and like sat through the entire trial, looked through all the evidence, looked at all the guy's journals, who was one of the perpetrators of the Holocaust. She found like throughout, the guy was like basically acting like a normal human being who was trying to do the right thing. It just, he happened to very, very dramatically misconstrue what the right thing was, to the point he's murdering children, you know? And I think if the human brain can be convinced to murder children on the grounds that it's the right thing to do, then surely human beings can be convinced to amplify some false allegation or some nonsense on social media because they think it's the right thing, whether it's about Haitians and immigrants on the right, or about, you know, a false allegation of sexual assault, or a false allegation that, you know, a Jewish person is doing something that's Islamophobic or hateful to the Palestinians. And the solution is not to like condemn everyone and say like everyone's scum.
Look, I think you're missing the issue here. Yeah, a lot of people do wrong things out of some sort of righteous action. The problem they're making with their inferences is fundamentally a lack of critical thinking, and these ideas about we need to wipe out Jews because they're a threat to us, or we need to believe all women or else we're going to support rape culture. Like, these are things that are created from some sort of inherent bias towards a certain group. And it could be a bias against Jews, black people, white men in general. The problem here is there's a lack of fucking critical thinking where I'll just believe things. And again, people will lie for righteous reasons. I can guarantee you there are people who were very skeptical about the Haitians eating cats and dogs story, but spread it anyway because they figured, well, I know most immigrants are jackasses, or I know immigration is bad in general, so I'm going to spread the stupid bullshit story anyway because I fundamentally don't care about the truth and I care more about some other objective. And I'm sure that's the case with these intersectional
I think that's true.
Some of them have even admitted to it. Alex Bez has talked about some other woman making a false rape allegation against him because she thought that she needed to lie in order to get him out of the movement because she thought he was like sexist or something or did some other thing to some other girl. So she also lied deliberately to spread like this bullshit nonsense. Like, people fundamentally don't care about the truth, don't care about fucking evidence, and they're ideologically captured by like some sort of inherent bias they have.
This is why ends justify the means reasoning doesn't work, though, in any context, including violence. Like, you don't lie to serve some higher purpose or a higher goal, because lying is just one of these inherently disrespectful.
That's what the MeToo movement is. Believe all women. It's explicitly in the ideology. You have to lie. You have to support lies in order to protect women.
I mean, it's not explicitly
literally
in the ideology.
In the name.
It's not explicitly in the ideology. They don't say lie.
It's explicitly in the ideology. We know women lie. We know they lie, and there's data on this. Depending on the study you look at, depending on
there's some degree of false allegation.
There's somewhere. There's like a 2 to 10% rate of false reporting. Depends on the study. I think the FBI statistic is around 8%. And that's only reported rapes. Who the fuck knows how many of these allegations made online where some chick makes a Facebook post to ruin someone's career or reputation, never reports it to the police? Who knows how many of those are lies? So it's explicitly stated in the name. Lie about men.
It's not explicitly stated. You're literally using explicitly
stated when we know women do lie. When you know,
where is it explicit in the Me Too movement that you're supposed to lie?
When you know women lie, but you have a movement that says believe all women, including the liars, then that is explicitly stated in the movement that you need to support lies.
If Me Too said believe women, including the liars, then I would be explicit, but that's not what they say. They just say believe women on the grounds that they think most of the allegations, and frankly, even if you're correct that, and I think you are correct, that somewhere between maybe 10% of allegations are probably false based on just what we know about even reports of sexual assault to the authorities. That means the vast majority of them are true. Right. And the problem is historically by default,
if you're
people
going to say
them.
Believe all women, and we know there are women who lie, then it is explicitly saying you need to support liars.
I think it's believe women unless there's contrary evidence. I think that's kind of what I interpreted as meaning.
Who the fuck said that in the Amber Heard case? No, when Amber Heard was saying all that bullshit about Johnny Depp, all you were hearing, believe all women. Anybody who said this doesn't add up, I believe Johnny Depp, he's a good guy. Believe all women. Believe all women. Nobody ever said, well, let's look at the evidence. You know, I'm a supporter of Me Too, but let's look at the evidence. Let's see what happened. No. No one was saying that.
Do you think she lied? I actually didn't follow that case that much. I was like the only person in America.
She's completely and utterly full of shit.
Really? Huh. That's sad if it's true.
She was, because I know Johnny Depp was taking some like really strong medication. It might have been an antipsychotic. It literally made him like pass out. She would give him his medication and then put like a bowl of ice cream or something in his hand. He'd slump in the chair with like ice cream melting in his lap. And then she'd take video footage so she could later show it to the court. Oh, look, he's strung out on drugs again. And he gets this way when he takes drugs and then abuses me. Like wow. She was just a disgusting, sick liar. She also almost severed his entire finger because she like threw
Ugh,
a bottle at him. And by the way,
Jesus.
this is a woman who has a history of spousal abuse. She's bisexual. Her last relationship with a woman, she was criminally charged with assault because she
Yeah.
abuses her intimate partners. Like, of all people to believe,
Hmm.
why Amber Heard? But again, the Me Too movement and this believe all women bullshit, it's just ideological nonsense, and it
Yeah.
was it was hinged on supporting lies.
Yeah. So I'm not going to disagree with you. I mean, like, because again, I've had personal experiences just like of, I mean, did you hear about the Peter Singer disruption that happened when I moderated the Peter Singer talk?
No, what happened?
So I'm moderating this talk of Peter Singer. He went on tour to discuss the most recent version of Animal Ration, which is called Animal Ration now. And this person gets up and asks a question and just like starts attacking me and claims I sexually harassed two of my ex-girlfriends. And this is not true, and neither of my ex-girlfriends would say this. But she made the claim anyways. And I don't know where she got it. I think she got it probably from social media, like one of these cases where she heard something. But I will say, even this person who I had met a couple times, and I was actually pretty disappointed she said this. I don't think she, and I think actually one of the women is pretty open about, you know, the other woman who I was accused of sexually harassing is like more private, but one of them is Priya, my ex, who's my best friend in the world, and was like infuriated by this. It's like, what the hell are people talking about? And a lot of people believe this. It's like, and I said in response, I said, look, I think these are serious allegations, and you should talk to the woman directly and find out, what they think. Because I think as a first step, that's like a reasonable thing to do. When there's an allegation, talk to the woman, listen to them, and see what they think. In this case, it would have led people to quickly conclude. And sadly, the internet did not quickly conclude this, because I've seen how ridiculous the internet gets. But even the exact person who made this allegation against me, I'm pretty convinced, because I went and talked to her afterwards, and I tried to talk to her. And she wouldn't talk to me. I basically said, like, hey, I just wanted to check in with you. And like, because basically I didn't want her to think I was deflecting it, but it was like, it was a discussion between me and Peter. And I was really trying to center Peter's work and not my own story. And so I felt bad for the event getting disrupted, basically, because of some, allegation against me. But I think it's like a reasonable thing to, if you are concerned about this, to try and look into it. So I went to her and I said, look, I'm happy to put you in touch with these specific women, or if they're not the women I think they are, any other women. And if I've ever offended anyone in any way or harassed anyone, certainly I'd like to know that. And I'd like to try and be better. And she just wasn't willing to talk to me. Like, she basically said, nah, and walked off. And I think, but even with this person, I got the sense that she was just genuinely threatened. I don't know if she had a bad experience
No,
with a
she
man at
hates
some
men.
point. No. She was genuinely threatened, even by my approaching her. And I felt a little bad even about approaching her afterwards. I didn't like force myself on her verbally, for the record. I'm not saying physically in any way.
Men aren't supposed to go up and talk to women. Don't you know that? Because men are intimidating and taller, and you have to make sure you yell across the room and ask permission first.
I didn't even get that close to her. I just was probably, I'd say 8-9 feet away. I just said like, hey, I just want to say, like, I know we didn't get a chance to talk about the thing that you brought up. I'd love to talk to you about this more, and I could put you in touch. But the problem is, even with her,
the fundamental reason she did that in the first place is because she's a misandrist who hates men. Why would she believe that?
I don't think that's true. I mean, I think
she heard on Facebook or something.
I don't think that's true.
Would you believe claims that Haitians are eating cats and dogs?
No, but the thing is, I mean, I think a lot of people have different standards of epistemology, and a lot of people, especially people. So, for example,
if you're a racist, retarded, misandrist, bigot, or something, you're going to have very different standards when it comes to epistemology.
And you need to stop calling people retarded.
Cats and dogs, you're going to be like, well, yeah, that's what black people do. They're all scumbags. Okay, and if you're a misandrist, intersectional feminist, and you hear, oh, some dude was abusive to his ex-girlfriend, well, yeah, all men are scumbags. Yeah. People have different standards with epistemology when they're fucking assholes.
Yeah, and for the record, I think Priya would be the first to say, like, we definitely had some arguments, and our relationship wasn't perfect in a lot of ways. But I mean, I hope she still loves me, and I can't contact her because I'm not allowed to talk to her anymore, given my felony conviction last year. But we love each other to death, and certainly, I don't think anything we did was like beyond the pale from any standard. Whether it's misandry, misogyny, anything like that. And I think she would agree, and I certainly agree with her. But let me ask you this. I'm not saying this is excusable at all, but if someone had just had a terrible experience with a Haitian person who had like maybe beat their child up or beat them up, could you understand if they leapt to conclusions about Haitian people a little quicker?
Well, yeah, I can understand why, because people are chimpanzees.
Well, I mean, but it's just
Oh, the monkey
it's
bit me, monkey bad. Like, yeah, I can
well, I
understand
mean,
that.
you're making fun of chimps, but I think
It
that's
doesn't
actually
it doesn't make it make sense. Like, it's still
but
stupid.
we're not all perfectly rational, Richard, and that's okay. Like we're imperfect. Your cat's imperfect. You know, you're telling me about how your cat got wrapped up in the microphone codes before this podcast. That doesn't mean she's stupid. It just means she's a cat. She's imperfect. She doesn't always get everything right. What's her name? Forget.
Well, him, Gummy.
Him. Sorry. What's his name?
Gummy.
Gummy. Oh, so
He's a
cute.
big handsome boy.
I don't believe you don't have empathy. You told me you don't have empathy, but I see you interacting with your cat, and I could tell you have empathy. Like you said that in a prior podcast. I was like, I don't believe that about Richard. Like he has empathy for lots of beings. But the point is, even if someone is irrational and reacting to a bad experience, and a lot of women have had a lot of bad experiences with men, you can kind of understand it when they've had that bad experience. And the way to overcome that, I think, is not to attack them and say, you're a misandrist, you have a bias against men. It's to just interrogate a little more and say, like, hey, tell me more about that. So, like, if I had been given a chance to talk to this woman, I would have said, like, can you tell me more about, why you're concerned about this? Is there something that happened to you? Can you tell me more about
These
what I can
people
do
are
to be
completely unreasonable. I mean,
some of them are.
like,
Yeah, some of them
there
are.
are
You're right.
women like there are women who make social media posts about feeling threatened because a guy talked to them in a fucking bar.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so look, if somebody is going to shout at me and call me like a spousal abuser because of some random rumor they heard online that didn't even come from like my wife or girlfriend or anything, fuck them. Like what's
Yeah.
the point in talking with them? Just like if somebody shouted at me calling me like a dumb N-word, oh, you're a monkey, you steal shit from the grocery store. Like, what's the point in talking to them? Like, they're
Because
just
that's how we
pieces of
build a
shit.
better world. Because those are people too, and we ultimately have to work together to make a better world. I mean, do you know about this guy, this black guy who talks to the KKK? I mean, it's cliche. Everyone always uses the
Oh
example.
yeah, I know that guy.
I mean, do you think that's worthwhile work?
Like, I mean, he's converted a few of them, so maybe.
Yeah, that's cool. So, I mean, I think you could do the same. I'm not even saying that you or I or anyone else. And
I've
honestly,
given
maybe you
these
should.
people every opportunity.
Yeah.
But all they do is say, "No, you're a sexist, white
Yeah.
supremacist, and you hate trans people." I've given them every opportunity. I agree to debate anybody. Anybody can come on my channel
But
anytime,
some
debate
people
me about
don't want
any
to have a
topic. No, I'm
debate.
interested.
Some people don't want to have a debate. They just want to have a
That's what it is.
conversation.
There's a disagreement, and we're going to work things out. It's an argument.
No.
It's a debate.
Yeah, I think there's merit sometimes. I think there's merit to debates for sure. I think debates are I mean, I'm a lawyer, so like I think obviously I like arguing. I think there's some value in argument. It's one of the reasons I like talking to you. But I also think there's value in having discussion and deliberation that is not about winning or losing or sides. It's just about like let's all be open. Let's all just try and figure that out. And I think ultimately that is a sort
That's
of
a euphemism.
that's culture.
That's a euphemism, and that's just weak words. Look, anytime there's a disagreement and you're trying to hash things out, it's a debate.
I think there's evidence from organizational psychology that not you specifically, but we in human organizations, social groups, do not get the right answers if people feel unsafe to share their actual convictions. There's a lot of evidence to this. And you can look at like things like the Challenger disaster. There's like a big case study of that and why, it didn't come out that there was this problem with the O-rings that was going to cause the Challenger to blow up and kill a bunch of astronauts. Or you can look at, communist China or communist Russia, for example, where it was really unsafe to share, like, look, we don't have any food. I know I'm supposed to have a quota of like 1,000 pounds of grain, but I'm kind of scared that I'm going to get punished if I tell you that. So I'm just going to pretend we have it and write down 1,000 pounds of grain. And lo and behold, you have mass starvation all over the country because everyone starts lying and they're detached from reality. So there are micro and macro examples of this, but the key thing is we need to create disagreement that also feels, I hate to use the word safe because that word has been so massively overused, but I'll use it anyways, that feels safe to people. And that means sometimes having discussions that are not about winning or losing
People are
or
afraid
fighting.
of debates because they're ideologues. They don't want to be wrong. They have to be right. So
You don't think some people are afraid of debates just because they're just not emotionally prepared for them?
As soon as you're around somebody who says, "I don't want to argue, I don't want to debate," what's going through their head? They want to be right. They don't want to be proven wrong. They don't care about evidence. They're willing to lie and lie to themselves.
They're just scared of being shamed.
Just to, well, fuck you. Like, I don't care. If again, this is just ideological nonsense.
Yeah.
If you're engaging with somebody who's refusing to debate, refusing to look at evidence, says like no, I don't want to argue, I don't want to be proven wrong. They're just an ideologue. They don't care about evidence. And like again, these are the intersectional feminists. These are some of the like far right people who, you know, believed Haitians are eating cats and dogs. These are the people who are avoiding debates and discussions, and they don't care fundamentally.
Yeah.
They just don't care.
But I will. Here's what I'll say. I agree with you, and I think you're making a very good point, which is I do think that generally we should trust people more who are willing to go towards hard conversations. And I think it's a worthwhile attribute for us to cultivate in ourselves and in one another to be willing to have hard conversations. I also think, however, that not only is it not natural for us want to have the hard conversations, but oftentimes people are punished. Like, it's not natural to want to have hard conversations. Like, you're a weird dude in this regard, you know, and I think I'm probably a weird dude in that I like having hard conversations. But for most people, it's not natural. But not only is it not natural, but people are punished for having them. Like, I guarantee you after this conversation, I'm going to get a bunch of hate mail.
By ideologues, by people.
Yeah, I'm going to get a bunch of hate mail. And there'll be people probably trying to cancel me.
The secret's out. We're full of shit. Yeah.
Yeah. But so the point is, I mean, I think this has been a good faith conversation where I've tried to share what I actually think, you know, and I'm trying to figure out what the right thing is for everybody: women, men, people of color, white people, Gazans, Israelis, everybody. I mean, I don't know. Do you think I'm malicious or I'm trying like an anti-Semite or something? It's okay if you do.
No, I think you're far too charitable for some people, and
so I'm a useful idiot.
Willing. Yeah,
I'm a useful idiot.
Like if
it's better to be a
if
useful
you think
idiot.
there's plausibility that Israel's committing a genocide, like yeah, you're a useful idiot.
I think it's plausible. I don't think it's improven. I think it's plausible.
Yeah. Under more expansive plausibility whatsoever.
Under more expansive definitions of genocide, you know, certainly, and it's not like
it's not
like the Holocaust, but.
Yeah, let's just use extreme, like Ireland. Let's change the definition of what genocide is just so we can fuck over the Jews, right?
Is that what people say about Ireland too? Did they say the English?
No, Ireland's trying to pressure the ICC to change the definition of genocide so that they can get a prosecution against Israel because they don't have any evidence.
Interesting. Okay. I thought you were saying the Irish were claiming they were victims of genocide, which...
No, the Irish government is anti-Semitic, and they want Israel to get a genocide conviction, and they're actually pressuring the ICC to change the definition of genocide.
Okay, well, look, I don't even remember what I was saying, but here's where I think we can probably agree that even we might disagree about how plausible it is to get to this point, but it would be a good thing if all of us became more deliberative and evidence-based. And we should aspire for that goal on all these issues, but especially these hotly contested issues like Gaza, like MeToo. If we could have like thoughtful, honest conversations, and this is like, and even the fact that our conversations have done pretty well, at least for my platform. The podcast metrics aren't terrible. The YouTube metrics are still not great, but you know, we're trying to build this platform up and get more people talking about things in a more thoughtful way. But the fact that people are interested in these conversations suggests to me that there is an appetite for like thoughtful conversations on tough issues, right? And not just people screaming at each other and saying, you know, you're an anti-Semite, you're a scumbag, blah, blah, blah. But there's, you know, granted, I do sometimes elevate some of the most inflammatory rhetoric from these conversations to promote them. But the fact that people are watching all the way through makes me think there is an appetite for this. So maybe where we can agree is maybe you think it's harder than I think it is, but both of us agree it would be good for us to get to that place where More people are willing to
yeah.
have thoughtful, evidence-based conversations about hotly contested issues
Yeah,
like Gaza,
absolutely.
like
But
MeToo, like
try
racism.
convincing a tribe of chimpanzees not to massacre
We can
another
do it,
tribe of
man.
chimpanzees.
Look,
Like,
so,
the
okay.
reality is that there's a huge section of the human population that don't think any differently than chimps, and they're just tribal, they're ideological, they don't
Dude,
care
there's
about
nothing
that
wrong with being a
crap.
chimp. Chimps are great. I love chimps. I think
No,
chimps are
they're
amazing
terrible.
animals.
Yeah,
Wow.
they literally commit tribal genocide. They have wars against
So
each
do
other.
we.
Yeah,
I guess that's your
that's
point.
why I
So do
don't
we.
like people.
So do cats. Cats like commit genocide against rats.
Well, fortunately, I can keep my cat indoors.
Yeah, wait, let's not have that conversation again. Because we're going to talk about how you're going to kill off all the cats. Here, I'll give you two examples, and then I'll let you offer any final thoughts. The two examples I'll give in my favor in trying to in believing in people, including intersectional feminists, including pro-Gazan people, Free Palestine folks, and including even people who think Haitians are eating pets. One data point is these trials, right? When we've had a chance to actually have a thoughtful, calm conversation, even and not even a fair conversation, but a thoughtful, calm conversation with a random pool of 8 people in deeply rural Utah and 8 people in deeply rural California. Because Merced, I don't know if you know anything about Merced. This is where, do you know Alexandra Paul, the Baywatch actor?
No, not familiar with him.
So she's, do you know the Foster Farms trial where these 2 women were acquitted for quote unquote stealing these chickens from the back of a slaughter truck? I represented them in this case, like in March, February.
I'm not familiar with that.
Okay.
But
well, anyways, they're acquitted in this case in Merced County, in a county. This is like Central California. And for those of you who know Central California, that's not the Bay Area. I mean, this is like deep red California where, Trump signs are everywhere. People are toting guns. I mean, this is like deep red California. And it's weird how, in many ways, I think deep red California is even more red than like red states, because they almost feel like even more like they have to fight the libs and take on all the stupid Democrats because, they're like close to the Bay Area and they hate us. And we got unanimous verdicts in both of those cases in deep South Utah. So the former Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, for example, he's the House representative for Bakersfield, which is right next to right next to Merced, where we litigated Alexandra and Alicia's case, and we won. We got unanimous verdict on defensive animal rights, saying you can just take us. If you see a chicken back of a slaughter truck, just take them, and we support that. And that's because we were given a chance to just deliberate. They were not tribal. They were not chimpanzees. They were like thoughtful people. Or actually, maybe they were chimpanzees, but I think even chimpanzees. I have hope for chimpanzees. I bet there are ways for us to expand the consciousness of chimpanzees, maybe using artificial intelligence, neural networks, like novel forms of communication. There's this cool project in North Bay called the Earth Species Project. Have you heard of this? Where they're trying to communicate with animals using artificial intelligence. It's crazy. So they use artificial intelligence to like read the language of animals and try and figure out, okay, how do we both first read the emotional states of animals and then second communicate to us our emotional states? It's like kind of visiting an alien planet and trying to communicate with the aliens, except through artificial intelligence. And they're not aliens, they're just other animals. So it's possible if we could convince chimps, if we could like communicate to chimps, even help chimps communicate with each other. So like the chimps before they went to war, like really felt what the other chimps are feeling. Because chimps do have some empathic capacities. I mean, their frontal lobes aren't as big as ours, but they have a theory of mind. They have the ability to like read other emotional states of other animals. Like there's this fascinating study in Sweden where this chimp had to learn both predict his future emotional state, but also predict the future emotional states of other animals. And he was able to do it. And I won't go into details, but it was super cool. So chimps like have a basic ability to engage in theory of mind, to like imagine what it's like. If we could communicate to them what it's like to have it be another chimp who's having your balls ripped off by another chimp in a tribal warfare, then maybe the chimp would stop. And I think we can do the same for human beings. And that the proof of it is like in the pudding. Like I think when we've gotten a chance to actually talk to these people, they actually understand what the animals are going through. And they're like, oh shit. Like in the case of Lily, the piglet in the factory farm in Utah, like you have these rural Mormon jurors saying like, oh shit, I wouldn't want to be a piglet starving to death on the floor of a factory farm. That's fucked up. I'm glad you took them, Or like in Merced County, oh shit, like I wouldn't want to be a chicken trapped with 5,000 other chickens in this terrible crate where I'm crammed and like I'm not given any food and water and like slowly dying of dehydration and starvation before someone slits my throat. I'm glad you took them. But it's because we were given the chance to actually talk to them. So that's data point number one. And I'm not saying that's definitive because that's like 2 jurors two juror panels of 8 people. But I do think the history of social justice and maybe even the history of courtroom adjudication, where we actually go to the jury for civil rights, for women's rights, for gay rights, we've seen a lot of progress to the courts and through juries, just like realizing, hey, I'm not down with like mistreating people. But the other data point is, in my history, you condemn all the animal rights movement for being intersectional feminist and for being like too woke or shit. But in my experience, like when we have gone against the grain in some cases. Like there were instances where there was some allegation. So for example, this allegation that involved Anita Kreinch in 2018, one of the reasons Anita was caught up in this, mob, in my view, I mean, I shouldn't say that's like a negative way of portraying it, but like basically trying to condemn someone who was being falsely accused was because she wasn't part of her deliberation. She wasn't part of the context. And I am in, at the time, Berkeley, which is the height of Me Too. This is like the most progressive, like woke liberal place. Everybody's, super woke on every issue. And when we internally within our chapter actually just said, look, we're all going to have a conversation. We're going to have thoughtful conversations about this. Internally within our chapter, which is filled with intersectional feminists, everyone was fine with what we did with this guy. And so we're not going to condemn him as a rapist because he's not a rapist. He did some things that were wrong. So, he's probably not going to get a fellowship, but he's still a member of the community. We love him and we can work this out together. And everyone was fine with that. It was like social media that blew it up and people outside of that context. So it wasn't like that the people themselves were bad, because these are the same intersectional feminists you're condemning. It's that the culture was bad and inflamed the people to engage in ways that are counterproductive. If we could create more cultural context, like we had this big ass meeting where everyone came in person, we like basically I shared everything I knew about the situation and gave everyone a chance to argue and explain why it was a problem. And I said, like, look, here's what we're going to do. Does anyone disagree with this? And everyone was pretty much fine with it. But it was because we were creating a cultural context where people could feel safe to actually share their convictions and have leadership share what we're going to do and why. And if we can do that, like Trump is the worst about this because he's just an asshole and like doesn't listen to anyone and just, I mean, I agree with you. Like he's the worst. But honestly, Biden isn't much better. I feel like they're both kind of terrible about this. And like, I would love to see, and I think social media is a great place to build this, like even conversations like this, spaces where people can just share what they actually think, and like assume good faith in each other and then reach good conclusions as a result. So anyways, what do you think?
I mean,
does that give you more faith to hear that all these
do is, but there are people who are just completely and utterly incapable of doing it. And if you allow bullcrap like intersectional feminists to, be in the movement, then yeah,
it's not intersectional feminists. It's people who don't have the ability to collaborate with others. Because there's lots of intersectional feminists who agreed with us on the approach we took. It's like there's tons of amazing intersectional feminists. There's probably tons of amazing
they're not fully taken
like
over and brain broken.
Yeah. So yeah. So I don't know. Anyways, I'm repeating myself. I just went on a rant. So do you have anything you want to rant about before we end? But I really appreciate this conversation. I thought this was really thoughtful, and I hope this is like a building block for the movement, frankly.
Yeah, I just think people need to use critical thinking skills, not assume things are true, not spread information that they can't confirm is true. They have to recognize that there is possibility of inherent bias, try to remove any bias that they have, and try to actually research, construct arguments in favor of either hypothesis, and come to a sane, rational, logical conclusion based on the preponderance of evidence. But again, I don't think I don't want to put a percentage on it, but there's a certain percentage of people who just can't do that. And if they can't do that and they start causing problems, I think you just need to get them the fuck out.
I think I agree with everything you just said, actually. And except I wouldn't characterize the percentage of people who can't agree with that as the way you did, because I think some people honestly just have some people just literally have psychiatric problems. Like they have borderline personality or something like that, and they just cannot.
Yeah, and again, if they're causing problems, you need to push them out. If they're more of a liability than actually, utility driving.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's try and create that culture where, because I think if we're going to create that culture, it's going to require leadership, and I think you're a leader in the vegan movement, whether you like it or not. Do you see yourself as a leader?
I don't know. Maybe I'm a wise spiritual guide for a lot of people.
For some reason, I can't imagine you. Like I'm imagining you like in a robe meditating.
I do meditate.
Oh, that's cool. What's your meditation practice?
Lately, I've just been observing my own thoughts.
Yeah.
It's important to be able to see your own mind.
Yeah.
Which a lot of people don't do. And rather than seeing their own mind, they just experience their own mind without being able to actually see it, have substance to it, and realize they can control it.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's cool. I think that's great. And I think
also, this is a very handsome kitty, and I love him. Look at him.
I would show you my.
This is my Gum Gum.
And this is my dog. Oliver, I'm going to say hi to Vegan Games.
That's a nice dog.
Yeah. He's gone through a lot. I know. Hi, buddy. I'm sorry. He's really frustrated with me. He wants to go on a walk. He's tired of me sitting in this computer. All right, buddy. I appreciate it. This is awesome, as always. Super, super great conversation. I think some useful disagreements, but also some useful agreements. Thanks again for doing this, and I'm sure we'll talk again sometime soon. Okay?
Yeah, no problem. All right, thanks. Bye. Take care.
We don't have to hurt animals. You can protect them. We don't have to kill them. We can care for them. And that's who we're meant to be, right? That's who we are when we're at our best. We're caring for each other and for the other living beings of this earth and not hurting them.